Wow. The Unity Movement's theme for 2020 is perfect vision, seen through a spiritual lens. And the sub-theme for the month of February is possibility. And the affirmation is, imagination swings wide the gate of possibility. And so come along on a journey. I've got one for you this morning. And I've titled my talk, Living in the Zoom Lens. English author and poet and dramatist Eden Philpotts wrote that, and I quote, "You never know what a fool you can be till life gives you the chance." Would you agree? He also wrote, "The universe is full of magical things, patiently waiting for our wits to grow sharper." Now I had to read that. Can he be implying that we humans are dim-wits? Or that we're, at the very least, somewhat dull-witted? That's something to think about. That's something I thought about. I want to begin with a true story about a magnificent and smiling golden Buddha statue. And it sat serenely in lotus position in an Asian monastery for many years. And history has it that when the Burmese army was about to plunder the city where it was, that the temple monks covered it with mud, stone, and mortar to hide its true value. And 2 centuries later, still covered in stone, it was thought to be worth very little. But in 1957, when the image was being moved to a new temple, it slipped from the crane and was left in the mud by workmen. And in the morning, a young temple monk who had a dream that the statue was divinely inspired went to see the Buddha image. And through a crack in the plaster, he saw a glint of yellow and discovered that the statue was pure gold. And today, some of you may have seen it, it's officially the world's solid gold Buddha, as tall as 10 men, weighing over 5 tons, and valued at more than $200 million. It sits in the Temple of the Golden Buddha in Bangkok, Thailand, where once again, many thousands of spiritual pilgrims still come and sit at its feet and find refuge in the golden nature within themselves. And yet I think there's a deeper meaning to this story, because I believe that there is a golden one, the God Spirit, the divine spirit within each one of us. Behind all of the facades, defenses, and images we present to the world, there is a bright and precious soul calling for expression in each one of us. There is the divine within us who is strong and wise and compassionate. And this inner one has a great capacity to give and receive love and to know the depths of the heart. This is the one we've been looking for all of our life. Look out here for it. We have forgotten the beauty and greatness of our divine self. The golden Buddha symbolizes the God self of you and me. We can hide who we are, but we cannot destroy it. It'll never leave us alone. The golden Buddha lives in and as each one of us. Robert Browning, the poet, puts the idea this way. He says, no matter what you may believe, there is an inmost center in us all where truth abides in fullness, and to know consists in opening out a way whence the imprisoned splendor may escape, rather than effecting entry for a light supposed to be without. End of quote. And I believe that it's the same story that's in our Holy Bible. It begins in the book of Genesis with God incarnating in all of life, breathing into life the holy breath, the divine spirit, symbolized by the golden Buddha in all life. We read in Genesis 1st chapter 26 to 27, let us make man and woman in our image, in the image and after the likeness of God. And so Adam and Eve are incarnated, breathed into. Adam and Eve forget who they are. They get covered over with a cement likeness, with a facade, a false self. And forgetting who they are, then the whole rest of the Bible then is about what it takes to come back home, to square one. And then what it looks like when we remember, when we wake up. We're also told in Genesis 2nd chapter, 21st verse, that a deep sleep fell over Adam. But nowhere does it say that Adam ever woke up. we may be dull with it. Spiritually, look for it. It's not in there. He acts like he's still asleep, but yeah. Okay. And spiritually, Adam does represent all of us. And so just imagine that all the events that followed Adam's falling asleep are a part of his dream, that what began as a happy dream for all of us seems to have tailspun into a nightmare. But nightmares always end with awakening. And while the dream may seem overwhelmingly real when you and I are in it, it becomes as nothing the moment we open our eyes, when we see through what I am this morning calling our zoom lens or our spiritual lens. We not only can see the forest, but we can see the trees. And we see that awakening of that divine self in human form in the personhood of Jesus Christ. This is what it looks like when you and I remember. He said in John 10:10, I am come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And so Jesus goes around telling the rest of us in John 10:34, know ye not that ye are gods? Say what? Know ye not that ye are gods? In other words, know you not that behind the chiseled away, like they did for the Buddha statue, is what's really true about you and me. It isn't that we have to get that goodness in us. It isn't that we have to do something to make ourselves okay. It isn't that there's something missing, and if you and I could just get that, then wouldn't everything be hunky-dory? No! It's about chiseling away, letting go of the false, and what's left is the purity, is the beauty, is the wonder that we sang about this morning, is the gloriousness that is the God of our own being, right where you and I are, right in the midst of us, always present. As Alan Cohen says, we had it all the time. Even behind the greatest and thickest facades, the golden Buddha lives. We can only imagine. Can you imagine? Talk show host Ellen DeGeneres writes, find out who you are and be that person. That's what your soul was put on this earth to be. Find that truth, live that truth, and everything else will come from within. Alan Cohen also wrote in his book, Dare to Be Yourself, he challenged us. He says, can you then dare to be yourself right in the midst of our current political, for instance, unrest and upheaval? Right in the midst of your dysfunctional childhood? We all had them. Right in the presence of your shaky economic situation? Right in the presence of your relationship challenges? Do you dare to be yourself in the challenge of any difficulty? Be it a disease you have that say, I'm big and I'm bad. Can you dare in the very presence of whatever the boogeyman looks like in your life? Or however your particular Goliath shows up to be? Can you zoom in and out with a spiritual lens? Can you dare to imagine and believe that there is something within you and me that is far greater than anything in this world? Our way shore is Jesus Christ in Matthew 5, 17 said, I came not to destroy these teachings, but to give them life. And later on in Matthew 28:18, he says, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. And in John 10:29, I'm giving you all these verses. He says, I and the Father are one. In other words, he's saying, I'm showing you what it looks like when a human being lives from this higher spiritual zoom lens, if you will, who's divinely incarnated and lets that divine incarnation shine through the lens of a human life. I mean, we all got it, but it's covered over. So he's telling us in many verses, this is what I'm here to show you. The Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 12, for now we see in a mirror darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as I also am known. Some years back, a 12-year-old Jennifer Capriati was competing in first-class tennis circles. Some of you may have read about that. And she was challenging and defeating some of the most formidable adult stars of that time. And when asked by a reporter if she hoped to be the next Chris Evert, Jennifer answered confidently, no, I want to be the first Jennifer Capriati. So how about the really first you? How about the really first me? The first real, fuller expression of who we came here to be. So I want to share some points with you this morning. Once I learn how to operate this, I can put them up there for you. And take notes if you're interested. And starting point is number one I've got is believe in yourself. Your real self, not the personality self, not the, image, not what everyone else thinks you are or says you are, but to believe in your divine self, that golden Buddha, that Christ spirit within, the self that God breathed into you. And even if you don't know that self very well yet, to believe in that self. I read where a 60-year-old man, he was attending a self-help workshop for the very first time, and he stood up and he said, I tried being myself once, but it didn't work. I realized I didn't have enough experience. Do you feel like that? Yeah. Be your real self. And this reminded me of a church sign I saw recently on Sunbury Road. And it read, a self-made man is an unskilled laborer. And we can all laugh because there's a poignant truth behind them and we can all identify with it. Because we all want to be more fully, more authentic selves. You and I could not even be breathing if that divine self were not present. That self is life, and that life is holy, and that holy life inhabits you and me. We call it ourselves, but you and I mistake the spiritual self for our personality, for our accomplishments, for the images that others hold of us. And I'm inviting you this morning to believe in yourself, your real self. What's underneath all of this facade? There's the golden one, the spiritual self, the divine self. And that one is you and is me. And like Jim played today, you can say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one, or else you wouldn't be sitting here today. And I wouldn't have been given this talk. And then from that belief in a holy self, that up to this point may have never even shined one little glint of gold, never through the ego's facade, even though it's been covered over through many different experiences in our lifetimes, it's still there, it's still true. You and I do have the strength and the courage to let go of the protective armor, the cementness of the past. Because as God's child, it can be no other way. All things come to pass. But this will not. And then from that belief in your spiritual self, point two is accepting ourselves, our full self, all the facade, all the stuff that's happened, all the many different parts. That we accept that in this human life there is a human journey. Oh, poor me. Well, there is a human journey. And as my little granddaughter liked to say, well, that's life, grandmother. That's life. And that self of us that is real and holy and pure can never be destroyed. I mean, it's always going to be there bugging you. We might as well deal with it. It can be hidden over, like the golden Buddha, but never lost. In the very midst of all of that, we're on a human journey. We're not saying bad human self over here and good divine self over there. We're saying spiritual self. And that spiritual self to integrate through the human self, that its golden light might shine through the human lens of our lives. Which means actually practicing the presence of God. I mean, actually doing it in the now moments of our days. In doing, you know, we talk about it. We do a good show up here, don't we? Bless you and all that. But doing it, where we practice making peace with and accepting all of what's been. Joel Goldsmith, founder of the Infinite Way, wrote in his classic New Thought book, Practicing the Presence, that, and I quote, "Sooner or later, every person who has known dissatisfaction, incompleteness, and frustration will learn that there is only one missing link." There's only one missing link in our spiritual lives here. And that is the practice of the presence of God. I can talk a good story, and you can too. But what are you doing? What are you demonstrating here? And God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. Genesis 1:31. Dare to believe that God makes no mistakes, that you are uniquely made to be yourself, and that looking through the spiritual lens, you and I are dearly loved, we are worthy, we are purity, we are light, we are spiritual beings, again, having a human experience. The late Ricky Nelson had a hit song that came out of a painful experience he had when he tried to stage a comeback after many years of being out of the limelight. And he'd been invited to perform at Madison Square Garden. And his performance had been highly advertised all over New York City. So he had a lot of energy around that because he wanted to relive some measure of that life, that fame, and that applause that he had in the past. And he said he really practiced hard to kind of resurrect the Ricky Nelson that had been so popular, the Ricky Nelson that had gotten his fame and the people have bought records of. And so he went and he performed Ricky Nelson. And he got a lukewarm, mediocre response. And he left the garden devastated. And from this he wrote a song about that experience of putting on a facade and how empty he felt. And of course the song Garden Party was a smash hit and bought all of the things that he had really wanted. But they came from his authentic self, the real and the current Ricky Nelson. I know we can remember the lyrics. I went to a garden party to meet with some old friends, but it's all right now. I've learned my lesson well. You can't please everyone, so you've got to please yourself. And I'm taking it to the higher self. So I'm inviting you this week to practice being more authentically who you are, to practice being more fully with your partner, your friend, your parent, your child, your work partners, I guess. I'm inviting you to practice dismantling the ego facade in your personal world this week. Just notice where it shows up. To accept who we are means a willingness to let that greatness shine forth. You know, many of us have a much easier time accepting our insecurities. We can all get in a group and commiserate, accepting the idea that there's something wrong with me, I'm just not doing something right. Then we have accepted the idea that in a moment's time, all things can become new. Jesus said, behold, I make all things new. The old has passed away. You believe that? This is a Christian church, you know. Check out your beliefs. The Apostle Paul writes this about Jesus. If any person be in Christ, he is a new creature. In other words, if any person is in this Christ mind, they are a new creature. That's 1 Corinthians 5, verse 17. That's the result of being in this divine self. Your whole life becomes different. Our whole life changes. And in John 14, verse 27, Jesus says, I offer you a peace, not as the world offers you peace. The world will offer you peace when everything seems to be in place for you, and you go, this is good. I can feel peaceful now. I got peace of mind because all of the pieces are in their proper spot. So now I can have peace of mind. Well, he's saying this kind of peace is a disturbable peace, a very fragile peace. And we all know that kind of peace. The minute you think you have it all together, it just starts slipping through your fingers. But Jesus is saying, I'm offering you something entirely different. I'm offering you a peace that will confound your human thinking. It'll pass all of your understanding about what peace is. This is peace with a sword in it. Matthew 10:34. I offer you peace with a sword in it. Now what he's saying is that this kind of peace is constantly cutting away, chipping away at the ego's facade. It's constantly letting go of the false. It's constantly discerning between what's important and what's not, what's real and what's unreal. And so this is point 3, releasing, letting go, and trusting in that higher self. Just trust it. So that means each of us in our own human journey is going to be required to sharpen our wits, to let the unreal go, and to claim the real in ways that will bring both pleasure and at times confound us because of what life will present to us. So the 3 starting points are, I don't know how to get them up there, Darren, so I'll just say it. Believe in your higher self, number 1. Number 2, accept your higher self. Number 3, trust your higher self. And so I challenge you to dare to be yourself, even at times when what you may get back is criticism, and you will. We're in a human experience. Now, I don't know where you're being challenged most right now to let go, but I do know that there's some aspect in your life that's calling to you to let go. It may be to let go of the opinions of others, past or present, or some other phantom. Only you know what it is. But whatever it is, just let it go and just be in the presence of God. Here I am, God. I don't know how I got here. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going, but I know that you know. And I'm going to trust you. That's my personal thing that I use. At the 1990 or 86 Cannes Festival, a movie titled The Mission. How many of you saw The Mission with Robert De Niro and, yeah, okay. And Jeremy Irons? It won the grand prize at the festival. And De Niro played a Jesuit priest who's suffering tremendous guilt and remorse over his earlier life of slave trading and over a murder that he committed. And he's trying to atone for his sins by suffering, and he devises a scheme to amplify his pain. And so he throws a huge sack of heavy weaponry over his shoulders and sets out to climb a steep mountain of rocks beside a towering waterfall, feeling that he's paying off his debts with every torturous and agonizing step. And when he gets to the top of the waterfall, a band of ferocious-looking Indians from the very Amazonian tribe from which he had taken slaves was waiting for him. And their chief, upon recognizing him, approaches him with a huge gleaming sharp knife. And certain that this is the moment of his death, the ultimate payback for his dark deeds, the man falls to his knees and awaits the final blow. The Indian steps towards him, raises the knife, and briskly cuts the bag of pittance from his shoulders. And together they watch the sack hurtle into the abyss. He's set free. I think you and I are sometimes like that man, bearing a sack of sorrow on our weary shoulders, laboring under a heavy burden of self-inflicted punishment and deep feelings of unworthiness. Get an amen on that.
Amen.
We believe we have sinned or been wronged, and we labor under the bleakness of our thoughts for hours, days, weeks, years, or lifetimes, and yet all the while, it's not a real sin that weighs heavily on our soul, but our thoughts about it. And we believe pain will buy us atonement, when all it really brings is more pain. And then we blame God, or we blame life for being cruel, when it is but our own mind that has kept us in chains. We don't need to exact payment from ourselves or others for past errors. We just need to let them go. To let it go. Let it go. I mean, how many times can we relive a personal horror movie before we realize that it will never bring us peace? There's a way to release yourself from the torment of guilt, sorrow. Walk out of the movie. Just get out of it, release it. Instead of replaying it over and over again, walk out of that movie and get into the light of this day. As Jesus said in John 10:10, I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. So we've got a choice here. So no matter what you're bearing up under, no matter what it is that's yours to meet in life now, we all got things to meet. That's a part of life. That's part of being human. And again, I don't know what your boogeyman is, what might be scaring you, or what your Goliath is. But I can tell you this, you're not the only one that has one. It's a part of the experience, and they look different to each one of us. I've read somewhere that the growth of our soul is that very place where we're scared out of our wits, where we feel cornered, where we're concerned, when we know our human power alone is not enough. It's that place. That's the very place that you and I meet the God of our being, that spirit within. That's the place where we all have an opportunity to dig deeper, to discover the inner gold and the value of having a Goliath. The value of having a boogeyman is the very challenge that they bring, because otherwise you and I won't chisel deeper through our facade. We just won't. We just won't. So no matter what form of the boogeyman or Goliath, trust the golden Buddha in you, your higher spiritual self. You know that place in you. Again, that's what brought us all here this morning. We're on the journey, and we're chiseling away at our own facade, and we're all here together. We are well companioned on this voyage. And so we can find ourselves somewhat compassionate to the story of the man climbing a mountain with a heavy sack on his back, feeling that somehow this is deserved. And what he discovers is nothing but unconditional love coming his way. So you're that one in your life, and I'm that one in my life, that we've betrayed the God of our being. Ricky Nelson went to the garden party, and he bought old stuff with him, and it wasn't satisfying because he was betraying his old real self. Or like the Adam or the Eve, we've forgotten who we are, and we've begun to believe in the cement that covered the true self more than we believed in the true self that was trying to emerge through the cement. You and I can quit going to that same movie, as I said before. We can choose to come out into the light. I mean, really, who could have imagined that an ugly old clam could contain a valuable pearl? Who could have imagined that a fuzzy caterpillar could become a beautiful butterfly? Who could have imagined that a golden Buddha could be hidden under a coat of cement? Who could have imagined that the great spirit of the universe would indwell each one of us as us? Who could imagine? The golden Buddha is within. This is truly a venture to be taken, a real challenge of the heart. It's a call to courage for all of us. And it's a calling that I pray you and I will choose to answer. But as for now, we can only imagine. God bless us all this morning.